Hi, this is Peter Teuscher. I'm here with Tobi Demker. Thanks for joining us for another podcast where we seek to have conversations that inspire personal development, professional development, and any other kind of change you want in your life. And we pick a topic and see where the conversation takes us. So hopefully today we'll have a conversation that inspires and gives you some insights and some great ideas. How are you doing today, Tobi?
Yeah, thank you. I'm doing really well. Lots of stuff going on. It's all good, interesting, fun. So
Life in Sweden is busy then, and as it is here. So
yeah,
good. Well, then let's jump right into it before the dog starts barking too much. Um, so you've got a cool topic for us today. What are you thinking about?
I don't know if it's a cool topic, but I think it's an interesting that I think or a topic that I think is very interesting. Yeah, I thought we could talk about networks. I always get kind of amazed by if you think about the network you have or that you inspire to have, what a wonderful resource it is, and how you can. Because me as an individual, I've never considered myself very good at networking and to be active in that kind of role. I know a lot of people who are wonderful at that. Although I think I'm quite good at sort of maintaining my network in a good way, and it's such a good resource for idea generation, for opportunities, for development, for all of these things that we talk about, for inspiration even. So. And in one of the programs that I do, we always do a network inventory. So the participants, they have a chance to sit down and think about networks in a few different aspects, so or from a few different perspectives. So it's regarding your professional networks that you have in your job. It's about the the professional network that you have in your sort of work environment. So perhaps outside of your organization, but say that if you're like us, we're consultants, and for us in that sense, networking is very important because we might not belong to one organization, but we work with a network of people that are all around us. So in that kind of working environment, obviously networking is really important. It's also about your social network. So who are people that you can entrust if you have any problems, or if you want to share something, or like people that you can talk to. And then it's also about and this is maybe the most interesting part, for at least for some participants. What is the network that you aspire to have? So what is a network that you don't have but you would like to have, that could be a resource to you and could help you in your development, or whatever needs you have. And whenever I do this, I always find something new, from different perspectives. And I always get amazed also by thinking about your social network, like who, because I would say, well, a lot of friends, but who are the friends that, like, if I really need something, and if I need some kind of support, or if I want to talk about an idea or something like that, who are the people that I would reach out to? And it's, for me, at least my experience is, it's not the people that I immediately start thinking about. It takes a little bit of a digging and reflecting on that question. Then, interesting things can come up.
I think networking conjures a number of different thoughts, memories, ideas, but I think we probably don't recognize. I think the whole idea of the network has become more relevant in our consciousness since the digital revolution, because the Facebooks and all those kind of social media things. We've got LinkedIn, and various different platforms where you where your network starts to, you start to see it, and then sort of the way it is, it's not always a actual representation, because there's plenty of people who connected with me on LinkedIn who I really don't know or have never even met in person, and then you'll have people on Facebook with 1,000 friends, right? I mean, how many of us actually could you really have 1,000 friends? Could you have a friendship with 1,000 people? It would be challenging, and I think that's where we have. Oh, now I'm drawing a blank on, the 150 people. What's that? Is that the Dunbar rule? Anyway, whatever. I'm drawing a blank, but what I'm wanting to say is that we have. It's interesting how our idea about networking and networks has kind of evolved, especially in the digital age. But when I think back to when I was living in Canada, and it's funny. I had a guy who did a lot of my graphic design for the business that I had, and he's like, he said. He didn't have any salespeople, but he said, you're my best salesperson, because apparently through my referral, he'd gotten a ton of business, right? Right. And so because I love doing that, when I have somebody I really believe in, I love to tell everybody about them, and so that's then you start to realize the power of your network. So I think there's certainly power in that, and I think but for me the most important thing about networks is understanding how much support there is in it, and like you say about resources, because I had a coaching today, and I was just explaining that I have a network of coaches, like, including yourself, and we'll coach each other. We haven't done it for each other, but I have a few coaches where they'll coach me, I'll coach them, or something similar, and because I believe in the value of coaching, right? So that's one resource. But I think we often don't realize when we sometimes feel alone in our problems, or we don't realize how many other people are experiencing the same things, but we also don't realize how many people are out there that could help us, that could support us in the challenges that we're facing. I think that's especially when we're in an age where communication's gotten poorer, even though we have more ways to communicate. There's more isolation. People feel more isolated because there aren't really these authentic connections. There are these, virtual spaces where you don't really know who's behind them, but the sort of daily interactions that you have with people. Whereas, it used to be you knew everybody in your neighborhood, or the local grocer and everything. And I mean, this is even a generation before me. I'm pretty old, right? So there were different kinds of networks. And I think now we have the opportunity to have global networks because our ability to communicate effortlessly throughout the globe. Whereas it used to be you network with local. And there are different terms for this too. When I think about, Italians, they talk about famiglia, but for them, famiglia doesn't just mean your family, right? It's those in your inner circle, right? And those are the people you trust. Those are the people you do anything for, and they'll do anything for you. And so there's a real sense of loyalty and support for each other. And so I think in different cultures, there's different ideas about that, the sense of community and so on. And all of these things are a form of networks, which is really important because as a species, we've become successful through our ability to cooperate in the way no other mammal does.
Yeah, and also speaking of that, I ran across some kind of future of work report. I think it was an IBM future of work report a few years ago now, where they were saying like the in the future one of the most important skills that you need to have is to be able to establish sort of working relationships within a project group very quickly. So learn to cooperate very good with people. So it's basically to learn quickly, but also learn to connect with people quickly, so perhaps to develop that kind of skill. So how do you connect with people in a natural way that's efficient but not superficial? I think it's a really important skill to sort of to nurture. But I also have to back up a little bit. I mean, when I started my career in Beijing, for instance, we had all these kind of networking parties and sort of this kind of business card swapping events with a lot of drinking and fun, and which was great fun for I guess for most of the participants who goes to these kind of events. but very superficial.
Yeah,
like
I was going to say, that kind of,
yeah.
I've been to a couple of those events and they seem less than authentic. And it's just because people are going there with the intention to network. And I don't think that's the way real networks develop, you know.
I mean, I guess it can.
It can.
I think of course you can. It can be a foundation or a starting point for establishing some kind of mutual beneficial good relationship, I guess.
For sure, and it just seems to be though this, sure we can help each other, but it's always I'll do something for you because I want something in return, right? And in life, I always find, when you give without any expectations, then with the only intention of just adding value, I think there's just and that's my own philosophy. Again, absolutely, there are mutually beneficial relationships and so on that work out, which also is something that sometimes leads to corruption. But I think for me, the networks that have developed spontaneously, just because people are, I get most of my clientele from word of mouth, right? And that's, my network grows that way. But it's not because I've intentionally looked to branch out and grow my network. It's people have naturally wanted to include me in their networks or bring me into their networks as a result of recognizing, there's some that we have common values. We have they recognize some way I can add value to the network or whatever. And I think those are the more long-lasting, meaningful, relationships and by default networks that you can build. So, and I agree. I think there's nothing wrong with, meeting up with people like-minded and then you happen to network. But these networking events, I find, I don't know, I have mixed feelings about them.
Yeah. No, I do the same. I mean, it's a different feeling when you sit down with a bunch of people who are perhaps in the same field, have the same kind of interest that you talk about something that you have in common because you're passionate about it and you share the same kind of interest and common sort of view on what you want to establish within this field or something. But I think that it's an interesting question is thinking about, so when we're talking about networks, or if we're thinking about networks, is this something that you should sort of proactively then manage and sort of interfere with, or is it just about authenticity and thinking about, well, if you are authentic and if you create if you treat everybody in the same kind of way with the same kind of respect, that you don't have to think about your network because it will develop naturally anyway. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I do have some thoughts on that.
You might.
I think that there are people who look to surround themselves with people who are beneficial to them, to their career, to the needs that they have, and so on. And I think that can work. It's just not the way I approach people in general. So I think that I think that when you have compassion for other people and empathy, and you are genuinely interested in other people, I think those are the kind of that's where I'm coming from as I grow, because it's for people who are just looking for that benefit, more is better, right? And I look for quality rather than to be networked with tons of people. I look for people that I really have connections with, who have similar values, or who where together with that person or through that person, I can find ways to add value or be of some service. And I think that is something that has done well for me, and that fits in with my values and my philosophy. But if you're purely pragmatic about it, and I'm not a fan of seeing people as a means to an end, and I think that's where and you'll see people who are diehard believers in game theory and don't believe in they believe in the zero sum game, and it's less about the win-win, and it's more about how it can get capitalize on, I know this person, therefore I can get this out of them, and they only see the utility in it rather than the how you can benefit from on another level from the relationship, from the experience of connecting with more people. So it's just a different way of seeing the world, and there are people who are super successful at that, and so I'm not passing judgment on it in any way. I'm just from my perspective on it, because look, let's face it, we're in this business because we are interested in people. I don't think we could be good coaches if we weren't interested in people and interested in helping people get to the next level, improve themselves, or find their potential, or whatever you want to call it. But if you're somewhat narcissistic, or there was a term I've heard referred to as benign narcissist, someone who as long as they have enough, they're happy for you as well, as long as they've got more than you or whatever. But they won't. Their envy doesn't manifest into some kind of negative behavior. But there are people that are purely out there to network, or they want to have certain friends in high places to serve their needs and to also say something about their status or whatever, right? There are lots of different motivations behind networking. So, so those are, I guess, if you want to call it negative, but I really like to focus on the positive things. Like your network can provide a great support, can be very educational, if you need information. Like I remember there's a friend of mine who I play basketball with, Pat. He's a senior. He's one of the oldest guys of the guys we play basketball with, but super fit. And he was in an unfortunate motorcycle accident. Someone was texting and wasn't paying attention when they changed lanes, and he was the unfortunate recipient of that impact. So don't text and drive, people. Anyway, so he wasn't happy with the prognosis of the doctors because they wanted to amputate his leg. And so right away, in the guys I play basketball with here in Hamburg, and my whole network around basketball, I said, listen, fellow basketball player, they want to amputate his leg. Anybody who knows a doctor or knows somebody who's a specialist in this. And right away, I got, through my brother is, people who through their network right away, they sprung into action, not to help me, but to help someone I knew. Because they could empathize, man, if I was a basketball player, lost and I had to amputate my leg, what would that mean for me? And so this is the power that networks have, right? You can put something into action very quickly, and more than ever now with the way our modern efficiencies of communication are. So again, that was something out of empathy. Nobody had a reward in it for them. They just wanted to help, right? And that's what I love about what networks can do.
Yeah, it can be. It's interesting when you see social media now, and you can. You have a lot of examples of like school projects, like school kids like posting a picture. I just want to see how many clicks I can get, or how far this can travel, or whatever, right? And you have this theory. I forgot. Maybe that was what you were referring to before, but apparently there's this theory that anybody on the globe can connect with anybody on the globe within five relations, or five sort of
the whole 6 degrees of separation thing.
6 degrees of separation. Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you know someone who knows someone and someone, you can get in touch with Donald Trump or whoever you want to get in touch with.
Yeah, isn't that the concept behind something like LinkedIn, right? So you somebody in your network probably knows somebody, and then so through that you want to make a sales call or whatever, that works that way, and it's interesting because it shows us how interconnected we really are, and that we started the year with Stephen Covey, and he talks a lot about sort of the growing from being dependent to independent, but then recognizing your interdependence.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing, networks really do, is they show us how interdependent we are. We can strive to be as independent as possible, but none of us could survive without many, many other people in our community, in our society, and the nations we live in.
Now we're taking this maybe on a global scale, but I'm thinking about globalization, now deglobalization, and then probably see some need for more globalization again. How do we see this interconnectedness of things?
Yeah.
But that's a different conversation. I think it's interesting
we could take it there.
What you mentioned about, we can have different kind of motivations for our network. So, if I'm a salesperson, and it's really important for me with quantity to create as many sales channels and sales opportunities as possible. So, of course, if I'm in that line of work, depending on what I'm selling, if it's a sort of product of scale. It's probably really important to go and just meet as many people as possible to connect these kind of opportunities for sales. And of course, there's nothing wrong in that. And
No.
I think you mentioned that there's no judgment in this. In terms of status, of course, it can be the same thing. If I want to raise my status and I surround myself in a network with kind of, if that kind of thing is important to you, sure, it can be a good accelerator for improving your status within a certain context, perhaps. I think it's interesting to think about when you're thinking about the network that you have, about the diversity of your network. For me, when I've been doing these kind of exercises and you related to, for like with your example with the basketball club, so you have sort of your basketball network, and then maybe you have your coaching network, and you can have your academic work network, and maybe you have like your your pub quiz network, and there's a great variety. And in Sweden, a lot of people, and I'm also engaged in sort of community athletic clubs that they're all just driven by people who volunteer to help out, which is a wonderful network to meet people, and you get to meet people with all different kind of backgrounds, but there's no hierarchy or there's no status there or anything, so everybody helps out. It's a very equal kind of platform to just get in touch with people. And then maybe later on you get to realize, the more about backgrounds of people, and you connect on a different level. But that's not the important thing. The important thing is, okay, what do we have in common? What is the purpose that we need to help out and serve? But then when you dig a little bit deeper, you can realize, I have a lot of, it can be a lot of opportunities for developing, for learning stuff, for creating things together. When it comes to communal service, to serving the community in a better way, etc. So thinking about the diversity of the network. So typically, if I have an issue, maybe I go to my friends, but what are some other networks, or what are some other people that can give me a different kind of perspectives on this issue? And then you can realize that you can get some very various kind of input from your network. So it can be a really good resource in that sense.
Yeah, I think the diversity one is a really important one. And again, so many of workshops we do, and there's some element companies want us to include diversity and inclusion in them, which I think is a really good thing. It's just and I just had this in a workshop last week where the emphasis was, they're forcing diversity and inclusion down our throat, but really they're missing the point, because what we need is diversity of ideas, diversity of experience, diversity of, and there was a complaint about how there was so much emphasis on gender and ethnicity because those are the visible kind of traits, and not enough diversity in soft skills and experience and different
diversity.
Absolutely. So, and a lot of women spoke up saying, there's all this emphasis on diversity of women in the workplace, and because historically that's a legitimate claim. There was for a long time there have been these boys' clubs, and there have been people who haven't been given opportunities. So I'm not discounting any of that, but I think if you look at, and one of the things I brought up in the workshop was James Surowiecki has this book, Wisdom of Crowds, and it really hits home the point that you can have experts, and they will not be as exact or as close or accurate as a group of people with diverse sort of backgrounds, experience, and so on at predicting outcomes, at guessing. There's one example about, I think there was some kind of a cow or a bull or something, and they were trying to guess the weight, and the crowd, the average guess by the crowd was much more accurate than the couple of experts that were in the crowd. And so that's just one of many examples in the book of how having a diverse group of people around you will get you far closer to the truth, or far closer to the answers you need than if you've just got one or two experts that you rely on. So this is the thing about in your network, to have diversity is really important. Plus, when you look at your network as having a support function, if you have a bunch of people who can just, if all your, having a lawyer in your network can be a really valuable thing, or a doctor, but if they're all just that, then, wouldn't it be great if I had a tax accountant or whatever, right? If it's like, who am I going to look to for support? Or too bad I don't have a coach in my network, sort of thing, right? So these are all those things where we support each other because we're part of this community, which we call a network. And I'm just struggling to think of a book that I didn't write. I wish I would have written it. I think it's called Linked. Yeah. And it talks about self-organizing networks. And, in many parts of life, like it's just, within computer language, it's really relevant how, with AI and everything. But throughout life in biology, you find these self-organizing networks, or self-establishing networks, and it's just the complexity of life it becomes obvious when you look at those kind of networks. And I talk a lot about systems thinking, and what is a system? It's this network of different parts, right? So I think there's lots of different ways to look at it, and so I think when you look at examples of that, and you can see how powerful networks are, and how diverse they can be, and how much when you zoom out and look at them, how much you can learn and grasp from them, right? So I think there's a lot to be understanding. There's a lot of complexity to it, and I'm not in any way an expert, but I think when not to take it for granted or underestimate the effect that our networks have, and the benefit they can have for us.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, when we've been talking a lot about the difference between sort of complicated and complexity, and, as you said, systems thinking, and if we look at the concept like viral change, right? It's all about how you influence the networks. So rather than sort of try to manage relationships, it's more about influencing networks. And how can we be successful in doing that without having some kind of concept of, what does it look like? What would I like it to look like? We don't know exactly where it's going to end up, but that's also the interesting part of it, right? So just considering, what kind of network do I have right now? What is the network that I would like to have? What kind of relationships do I have? Or what are the sort of opportunities for me to influence my network? How can I support the network? What kind of benefits can I get from the network? And
how can I be of service to my network?
Yeah, exactly. Well, if you want to be a sort of positive catalyst and thinking about how can you contribute to something, what is the first step?
Exactly, and this is a really important, and I'm glad that you're pointing the conversation in this direction, because people talk about what can I do? I'm only one person, but I'm a big believer in the power of one, and it's all because of the network effects. Because what I always point out to people is, well, you don't think you're very powerful, but you're part of the most powerful group in the world, right? You're a consumer. Consumers are the most powerful, at least in our free market system. Consumers are the most powerful people because, corporations spend hundreds of millions, billions on research, on marketing, on trying to influence consumers, on trying to understand consumers, consumer trends. And so when you buy something, that there was a documentary I once saw, and they talked about it as, whatever gets scanned across the when your item is scanned across in the grocery store or wherever, it's your vote for that item, right? So when you choose to buy, organically grown, I mean, obviously there's privilege there. If you have the means, you can afford it, to choose between buying organic or factory farmed, or ethically made goods versus stuff that's made in sweatshops and wherever in the world. I think there's tremendous power in that, right? And as long as you're informed, right? And but that's what the whole democratic process is about as well, right? So you have these political networks, right? And so the thing is, as I said before, networks can be a real force for good, but they can all be a real, they can lead to corruption. And when you find ways they can be manipulated, right? When people, the influencers within, this is why people, there's actually a job of being an influencer in the world, right? Because, these people who have the attention of a lot of people, and then when they can be bought, and then the things that they're willing to put out into the network, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this. There are probably people who will only take on, sponsors or whatever that are in line with their values. But there is going to be a segment of those people who are, whoever pays the highest price. Just like there are celebrities who will endorse whatever product without really caring if it fits in with their own philosophy. So these are the things that if you are you have within these complex networks, you have these nodes, you have these places where a lot of information intersects, and that's the same in human networks, right? So you'll have these people have more influence than others. And so just being aware of the influence that you have in your network and whether that's a force for good or not, I think is an important thing to consider. And look, I'm not trying to be this holier than thou guy preaching, but I'm just thinking I'm just saying it's something to be aware of, something to think about. I'm not telling you what to think or what to do, but be aware of it. Be aware of the impact that you have, and you can see that within your network.
No, it's interesting when you zoom out like that as you're doing, we really can see how we're all interconnected with if we like it or not. But then it makes you think a little bit. Okay, so how is the network impacting me? So what am I receiving? Good and bad, but how's it impacting me? Because we are also consumers of the network in some way, right? We are being influenced by the influencers. Pointed out, right?
I certainly am on certain topics for sure. Yeah.
But then also think about, okay, so as we said, how can you contribute to this network? How can you be a positive force? And that doesn't mean being an influencer, but it can be as simple as, okay, so thinking about the network, perhaps connecting with someone that you would like to understand a little bit more about, that you thinking about diversity. Okay, so I've sort of lost touch with my musical network, or with that political network that I used to discuss things with. Maybe I should relate to them a little bit again. And then I also was just thinking about this idea when you mentioned how many doctors or lawyers or whatever you have in your network. Imagine if you're sitting at a dinner table and everybody's a lawyer, for instance. What is that kind of conversation going to look like? Yeah. But then if you're sitting at a dinner table, you have one lawyer, you have one tax accountant, you have one doctor, you have one architect,
taxi driver.
a taxi
Yeah.
driver, you
Garbage
have,
man.
yeah, a cleaner, whatever.
Yeah.
That's going to be a really interesting conversation, right? It's going to
Absolutely.
be a very interesting dinner.
Yeah.
So, so just spicing up things with the network that you have around you. It can really add some spice to life, I reckon, right?
You know, it's funny. There, when people you wouldn't even think about, or you know, collectives of people where you want, you know, you wouldn't even associate with networks, because there was the book I read recently from Eric Barker. It's called "Barking Up the Wrong Tree." And it's kind of an analysis of about what makes people successful, and there's a section he was talking about networks, and interestingly enough, you know, you think people who commit crime want to, you know, the least people that know the better, the less chance I have of getting caught. But actually, it turns out that drug dealers actually use their network to avoid getting caught, to support each other, and you know, because you would think of the opposite. You got this picture of gang warfare and people all very cutthroat industry. And apparently, according to Eric Barker, or at least his research, apparently drug dealers really rely on their network to not get caught, to, you know, help solve problems.
Wow.
I guess logistical issues. It's not an industry I'm very familiar with, so. So it's so the, you know, everybody uses networks, and it's interesting how and so when you're trying to stop something, you know, how do you disrupt a network, right? And that's why networks are very robust, right? Because you can block somewhere else and it'll get rerouted, and this is the interesting thing when you look at you know, something like networks of like the internet, and how robust it is, because there's so many nodes. It's not centralized. It's decentralized, and this is the great thing about decentralization. This is why, you know, proponents of cryptocurrency, you know, Bitcoin being the most popular one, and the benefit is, you know, it's not manipulable, or it's manipulable is the wrong word. It's less controllable because it's not centralized, and you know, it comes out of the. You know, I think one of the motivations was, or at least we don't know, because Satoshi Nakamoto, I think, was the guy who apparently started Bitcoin. But apparently it was because, you know, the big financial crisis, and, you know, currencies being manipulated by governments and so on, and someone felt the need for this decentralized currency. So whatever the reasons are, this is the reason that's apparently given for that. But it just shows the power of these networks in many forms, because it's ultimately that's what crypto comes down to as well. It's you know, it only functions because of its network. So yeah, it's a fascinating topic to think about in multiple facets. But I think you know, you proposed this more in terms of, you know, the human connection side of it, which I think is the most important one.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it's as you said, the way you look at networks. I mean, you can really zoom out a lot, and you realize that, well, everything is a network. The market is a network, right? As you said, we're consumers. We're voting with our feet, and whatever, with all the choices that we make or don't make. But so, and I think it's interesting and important just to have an awareness and a consciousness around that, to think about how do we fit into this. But then if we zoom in again, what I always realize when I do this kind of network inventory is like, oh, maybe I should spend a little bit more time with these people. I kind of miss them. And thinking it can be just by, I haven't talked to this person in a long while, or I realize, oh, this could be really important for me right now to support me with challenges that I have, or whatever thing that I'm more motivated to focus on. But also on a really personal side, I always realize, oh, I'd like to call this person. You know, there's I have a few friends that live very far away from me in different countries, and we don't speak that often. But then when I do this, oh man, this person is really important to me. I need to phone him or her up now and have a conversation.
Mm.
So it's just it's also good to just reconnect with people that are actually important to you.
Yeah.
But it's easy that we uh, sort of glide apart to different parts of the world in this global world that we're living in.
And it like the point you made about, around the dinner table and having different people there. I think this is one thing that I really appreciate about my ability to travel and the fact that my work takes me to so many different places in the world, but also places I visited privately. But I find when like I've been to Africa, I've been out in the bush, and you realize how differently someone living out in the bush sees the world, and how we get so wrapped up in our problems that are kind of unique to our network, if you will. And then when you get outside of that network, it's very eye-opening, the things we complain about and how from such a high level. And I think, again, when you can have those experiences and bring them back within your network and let that kind of evolve and spread, I think that's another way to add value is bringing different perspectives in. And so because, there are cultural networks, people, when you move to a new country, it probably wasn't the case for you moving to China, but and I avoided it when I moved to Germany. I specifically avoided hanging out with only expats, but a lot of time you gravitate to people you have stuff in common with. People with the same language is a standard one, but then certainly if I hear about a bunch of Canadians getting together, I've got to go meet up with them, and because you will feel at home, it'll be that taste of home. But I think there's when you try to when that becomes your main motivation for hooking up with people is just all these things that are familiar to you, then I think that you lose out. I was in Vienna this week and met a guy who'd been living in Vienna for 22 years and didn't speak the language, like didn't speak German, or just very basic a few words. And I think, what are you missing out? How are you, what elements of your network, how limited is your network in the city because you don't speak the local language, right? So yeah, I think that's really interesting. We get in our comfort zones and then because your networks can become insular as well, right? In terms of, and so the whole, information network is super interesting. The way things communicate and flow. And when I talk to people and listen to their worldview, and then I realize that they've got one source of information for all of their news and everything, and they don't. We have such an opportunity with the flow of information that you also have a knowledge and information network, right? That you can draw from, and the broader that is, the more diverse and robust your knowledge is, right? The more sensors you put out there and get feedback, the more accurate your picture of the world will probably be, right?
Yeah.
So
it's multifaceted, kind of, or lots of colors on that palette.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking of an example. If you're in our world, say that if you're working in an HR function and you're only talking to HR people, it's going to be very difficult to serve the business if you don't have any understanding or any kind of empathy for what the business challenges are. If you're only wearing the sort of HR glasses, and I think for people like us, it's really important to have a variety of different kind of clients in different industries, so we can provide better and more sort of I wouldn't say a more accurate view of the world, but a more this faceted, multicultural. Can you say that? Is that a word?
Multicultural, but colorful, I guess.
Colorful, yeah. A more colorful view of the markets and draw from different examples of what you're doing in different kind of industries and different companies, etc. We can serve our clients in a much better way.
Yeah, and I think the other one to that is the intergenerational is super important. Respecting the experience of elders. in indigenous cultures, you have so much of this, and it seems, unfortunately, in Western society, at least in some circles, there's no value for, think about how we treat the old. We put them in homes, we keep them separate, and obviously when it's about health concerns, that's reasonable, but we distance ourselves, and I think there's so much value in this connection between the generations, because that is another kind of a network. It's we're networked to our past, we're connected to it. And I think that is sad. I think one of the two of the most inspiring people in my life and influential were my grandparents on my German side of my family, my mom's side. And so you people who've been through a ton, right? Been through really hardships and so on, and worked their way through it, and just the kind of experience and perspective that they bring, and how that makes your life richer because of it. So, and then you get kids. If you can get kids together with their grandparents, they're not just these boring old people, but if you can have some try to bring these two cultures together on a level that you can communicate and understand, there's so much value in that. And so not just the colorful or the intercultural, but also the intergenerational, I think, is really important to have in our networks.
That's really interesting, actually. And if you think about it from the other side, I mean, how much do we understand, or how diverse is your network in terms of understanding the younger generation? I mean, that maybe that's telling the audience a little bit about our age, but how much do we understand the motivations and the patterns of thinking of the younger generation, the people who are or just entered the workforce? I mean, we know that this is a really big challenge for organizations in terms of onboarding and retaining, etc. And we see a lot of this sort of backward mentorship where you're getting sort of mentored by usually very young individuals in the organizations. But also thinking about that, how much do you hang out with younger people to understand what's their worldview? How do they view the world, the challenges, the future, etc.? It's that's very, very worthwhile, right?
Yeah, I make an effort to interact with all different age groups. So my girlfriend's a little bit younger than me, so we've got that. But no, her daughter is 8, going on 9, and that's been such an enriching experience having her in my life, and just I'd never interacted on a day-to-day basis with kids, so that's been really great. And then my trying to set out to find ways to coach young people, like 16 to 20 sort of thing. So I've got a young lady that I coach on weekends who 16, and that as well. Not only am I trying to add value, but I find the interaction super interesting to see those perspectives. And I think we have these judgments of the older generation has a judgment of the younger. There's so many people talking about Gen Z and Gen Z. I gotta be true to my Canadian roots. Listening too much American lately. No, but we talk about these generations, upcoming generations, and their work ethic or whatever, and there's a lot of judgment there and a lot of misunderstanding. I agree with you. I think the intergenerational is not just respecting the old, the elder, but also finding ways to connect with the generation gap. And things like when you talk about what's on TV, well, who watches TV under 30 these days anymore, right? So and so understanding through what medium people get their information, or what interests them, and how the world is changing for them, and through what eyes they see things. I think that is all super, super important and interesting.
Yeah, so wow, the network is really kind of it's the universe that we surround ourselves with in I mean socially, right? And it's a really really rich source of information. Super interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think, especially coming from a systemic mindset and viewing the world through systemic principles, I think it's the network concept is unavoidable and an important one to keep top of mind. So yeah. So we want to leave it there.
I guess. I mean, I think this has been fascinating because you when you bring up a topic, oh, let's see what this leads to. But it really, the more you dig into it, you get into different aspects of the topic, and it's kind of overwhelming actually. But it also gives me some ideas of thinking about how do I navigate in this network, and how do I make the most of it for in a positive sense.
Absolutely, and I think it's funny because when we first jumped on, because today was a very spontaneous topic, and I hadn't really given them much thought. But the one network we didn't really get into is your brain is a network as well. It's not just this. It doesn't work linearly, and so it's amazing to me how many connections with our thinking processes and our memories. Those are all networks within our brain, and I think it's amazing to me how sometimes just having a conversation like this is what I like. It's not planned. We don't have a whole script here, and the where the conversations take us is part of this whole network of the way our two mental networks are interacting with each other, exactly. So to speak. So anyway, sorry, I don't want to bore any of our listeners, but I love these conversations, and I thank you for this one. So great. So we'll leave it there. I want to thank anyone listening, and I hope it's been eye-opening, thought-provoking, and hopefully a little inspiring to listen to us talk about networks, and have you hopefully reflect on what that mean for you. So thank you for everyone joining us and listening today. So with that, I'll say goodbye, and we'll see you next time. Take care, Toby, and I look forward to the next one.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Cheers.